in my remarks, but it's an honor to introduce this group. And I first want to just tell the board how much I appreciate your efforts as well as Dr. Dowdle's efforts to continue this tradition in Canyon School District. I think it's important, especially in the year like we've had in a pandemic, that the student voice and input into how we do things in the district, whether it's policy or protocols or anything else, that their voice is heard and brought to the table, especially considering that all of the actions that we take affect them and impact them on a daily basis. And so with that, I thought I also want to tell our high school principals thank you for their efforts for selecting these students. I thought their choices were well done and very diverse in that way, representing lots of different student populations, which I think is very important. But before I introduce the students that are here, I too want to just share deep appreciation to the students that participated with us. We actually started out in person early on, and then as the pandemic shifted and changed, we moved to an online platform, as you all know, and it was just a challenge, right, to face when you really want to be together in person and you want to talk about these issues and you want to dive deep into their lived experience and what they can share. It's always hard when you have to move away from that in-person connection and move to online. However, having said that, I thought the students were terrific, and they met at each of their locations. They were very articulate. They're very honest. Sometimes, it's hard to understand their lived experience when it's not easy, but I just want them to know, and I've told them this before, how proud I am of them for stepping up and participating and being willing to put themselves out there as a leader. And I think as I listen to their experiences myself and about their relationships to their peers and their students, this will be a year that they will certainly never forget. But I know it will serve them well later in life, because from these experiences, I know that they'll draw on those later as parents themselves, as leaders in our communities going forward. So I just want to tell them how much I love them and respect them and appreciate them being here with us. So we'll go in this order. We have three of our students here tonight, and I want to extend gratitude as well to our other students that are part of the council, the advisory council, that couldn't be here tonight. Obviously, being a high school student is a very, very busy life. And so I know they have other things that they're at tonight, but they're committed to. But we have three of our student leaders here with us tonight. Parker Pogue from Corner Canyon High School, Logan Oviatt from Brighton High School, and Henry Salinas from Hillcrest High School. So we'll go in that order if they want to come up and share a few thoughts. And then I thought after we could do a group picture with the board and these student leaders, that would be terrific too. So Parker, you're up.
Yeah, and while Parker's coming up, and I also think there's some board members that would like to give some remarks, and then we can do the picture if that's all right.
Yeah, thank you guys, first of all, for having me out here today. I just wanted to first start by thanking Dr. Robbins. I sent an email to him like kind of frantically, probably around July of last year, if I remember correct. And I was just like, I'm lost. I don't know what to expect for this year. And like, I want to be the best leader at my school I can be. I just don't even know what to expect. And he replied like within a day, super enthusiastic to sit down and meet with me and the other presidents from the other schools. And like without hesitation, everyone was super excited to do it. And so like, I just want to say I'm super grateful for Dr. Robbins and the relationship that he's had with me and the other presidents and the other students on the advisory board. I think that he's connected super well with all of us. And then like, as far as the advisory board goes, I thought it was just like a really cool opportunity and like gave me a lot of people to like kind of bounce ideas off. Like I reached out to Max Lepore, the president at Hillcrest, and I reach out to students from Alta and Jordan all the time. And I think it's just like having other people to like connect with and bounce ideas around was so helpful, especially during a pandemic like this. So yeah, I'm extremely grateful for you guys like rolling with the punches as well. And even though we couldn't meet in person, giving us a chance to still meet and talk about important issues. I think a lot of good came from some of the stuff that we talked about. So I really appreciate it. And I hope that like this can carry forward and that the person filling my shoes can have this same experience. So thank you guys.
Thank you.
Okay.
No, it's great. Thank you. First off, I also wanted to express my gratitude for all of you and for Dr. Robbins. This has not been an easy year for anyone, students, teachers, administration. So yeah, I just wanted to express my gratitude for that and all the work that you guys have put in this year to try and make sure we can salvage and have the best year that every student can have. As far as the advisory council goes, I thought it was a wonderful experience. Being on that board and being able to talk to people from different schools and bounce off ideas, how they were doing things at their school was really beneficial, especially when trying to decide how we would do things at our own school. It was nice to see how people were doing things at other schools and district. And yeah, I've made connections with other students from other schools that I think was very beneficial and I will keep for the rest of my life. And as far as having a voice, I feel like not a lot of students get to directly communicate with the board and during their high school career. We can have emails and different things like that. But as far as direct one-on-one communication goes, I think that is extremely beneficial for students. And I had people in the hallways and, my friends ask me, hey, are you having a board meeting? I mean, could you bring this up? Could you talk to some of the board members about this and, talk about this? So yeah, I thought that was very beneficial. Anyway, thank you all. And yeah.
Thank you, Logan.
Hello, my name is Henry, and I'd like to begin with by thanking all of you guys here. Thank you for giving me and the other students from each of the schools the opportunity to be able to express ourselves. Like I've always struggled with one thing. It's not having the voice to like give my opinion. Sometimes it guides me through the wrong path, of course. But like I've always felt like we should be able to be given um a voice, that way things could get fixed. And that's what I appreciated about this student council. uh, my fellow classmates and I, the biggest takeaway from this was just uh that you guys were allowed us to express ourselves. You guys allowed us to give our voice rather than only having SBOs. Like it's typically SBOs making all the decisions for all of us, when in reality there's different cultures at each schools, and they all have their own problems. Like with this opportunity, like I felt like I was given a voice, but like not a ton of people were given a voice. Like there's a bunch of other students that could have been given this opportunity, and gladly I was given that opportunity, and I'm thankful for that. I know that in this student advisory council, we were able to talk about difficult topics and topics that were very important for all of us. We talked about like the Friday school and like our mental and emotional health, and I think that was very important and helpful to me and the fellow classmates. On behalf of the 4 Hillcrest students, we are very thankful for this opportunity, and hopefully I hope that next year it'll keep getting better. Hopefully next year, when everyone hopefully comes back, this opportunity will be expanded, and more people will be able to be helped by being able to be given a voice. Thank you.
Thank you, Henry. Okay, I think a few board members would like to also share some of their thoughts from this experience this year. Let's start with Mrs. Oakes and then Mrs. Schill, and then Mr. Millerberg, Mrs. Nybauer, Mr. Wrigley. All right, we've all got something to say.
Parker, Logan, and Henry, thank you for being here. And I want to express my thanks to everyone else who served who also can't be present. This was a delightful experience for me as a board member to spend that time with you guys. I really looked forward to our meetings together, and I loved how candid and open you were. You made us better. And even listening to you speak again today, I'm reminded all over again about why that is. You're all so bright and so capable. You have so much to offer. I hope to see one of you someday, at least one of you, as a board member for a school board. And Logan, thank you specifically for sharing that about the fact that the student body at your school knew that you were talking to us. And I wonder if moving into the future, if any of you have ideas how to better accomplish that awareness for the student body at the respective schools. I would love for them to feel like there's more of a conduit or a connection or a way that they can have their voices heard, because that is so important. So thank you again.
Thank you. Mrs. Schill?
Okay, I just want to add my thanks, and I really appreciate you guys being here tonight, Parker, Logan, and Henry, and just all the students are on the board. And I really liked how we did it this year. This my 2 bits that we had like a bigger group of kids. In the past, we've just had 2 students from every school. So this year we tried to make it bigger. And I really appreciate your honesty and just how we asked you guys some tough questions. And I really appreciate you guys being honest and being willing to answer those questions and help us. It was a difficult year, but we really appreciated you giving us information, and hopefully we were able to, answer some of your questions and help you. So best of luck in your endeavors. And I know you guys will all go on and do great things.
Thank you, Mr. Millerberg, and then Mrs. Nybauer.
I'm going to cheat and take that down while I speak. I'd written down a question before we started, and Henry, thank you for asking my question without asking it, because this was the first year that we've had more than just 2 representatives from each school, and that we've tried to, as the word you used, Henry, was different cultures inside the school. And I found that very, very helpful for me to help me understand what was going on in the school. So Henry, thank you for asking the question before I got a chance to ask it. I will also say, you brought up the idea of the 4 versus 5 day in-person school week. Before we had that meeting online, I think my mind was pretty much made up that it was time to go back to 5 days. And I will tell you, the Student Advisory Council was one of the main factors that swayed my thinking when the Advisory Council, you told us all the good things that were coming out of that and how beneficial that was for the students. And so thank you for your honesty, being willing to speak up and make that happen. If I had any regrets for the Student Advisory Council, that is, as a board, we can only have 3 of us together at a time, which limits us to only a couple of meetings that we can attend. Now, my proposal would be that I get all of the meetings and they can fight it out for the others. I don't think that's going anywhere.
Thank you. Mrs. Nybauer, then Mr. Wrigley.
I wanted to express my thanks and congratulations. You just completed probably the hardest year in student leadership on record. You had to tell your peers we're not doing dances. You had to tell your peers how all of these things were changing. And I know it was tough for you. And to communicate that, and I know you got a lot of flack from your peers. And, of course, I know Parker Pogue the best at Corner Canyon, and the leadership and the communication that was demonstrated and the example. I know your peers were maybe having dances at different locations, and you held up the higher standard because people looked to you. And I'm really proud of you for that. I'm proud of you for how you advocated for your peers and asking for some regulations to loosen as we got COVID under control and with vaccinations. And just really salute you as just all of you in your student leadership positions. It was one thing that was impressive to me is we have these, you know, you have the charities and fundraisers, and at Corner Canyon, we had to do it different this year. And Parker, he'd had a great campaign going online, and we raised a ton. You raised a lot of money, and I know that each of you in your leadership positions, you did just that. You were flexible and you made things work with your circumstances. And so it will be fun to follow what you do in the years to come, because I think you've demonstrated your leadership and then some. So congrats and thank you. And I just salute you for an awesome year.
Thank you, Mr. Wrigley.
Yeah, thank you. You know, the best part of being on the board is being with the students. So this whole year, that it was one of my highlights to have that opportunity. And we had, I mean, the session we had on mental health, I thought was pretty intense. You guys, we kept throwing questions at you, and you give us honest answers. Now, this was a difficult year. One of the things that you taught me was that this year is probably impacted even more than last senior class. Last year, we talked about March and through May was affected by COVID. You guys pointed out several times that you had the whole year affected by COVID. And hopefully as we get this last month or so, a couple of weeks, we may get a little bit back to normal. But so of all the different times, this has probably been the hardest time for you. I've really appreciated, sometimes you said, well, are we really making any difference? I didn't see if this policy didn't change because what we did or that or whatever. You know, as Mont said a little bit here, sometimes you don't see. I'd like to ask a lot of questions, and I take all those questions in, and as we talk with the students and stuff, and come up with a final answer and how we craft different policies and stuff. So you have made a difference on that. You have made an effect not only on this year, but your input has made an effect for future years, for future people, kids and students after you, then that has made an effect. I think the biggest thing I'm hoping you learned that as we met, that elected officials are only just people. That you don't have to, you know, that you should be able to talk with us and come and talk with us and share your voice. One person talking is worth 100 people that doesn't call you. So for each one of you said something, there was probably 100 people that didn't. And I hope it encouraged some of you, as Mont said also, that eventually somebody might decide to run for a board or public office or something like that. We often complain about those people out there that aren't doing their jobs. That's pretty much how I got in office, complaining to my wife, and she said, well, do something about it, run for office. So, you know, do more than just complaining, actually make a thing and do something forward and positive. And I think each one of you will, because I've seen some real leaders over this last year. So thank you for your service this year, and good luck as you go into college next year. My son's in college this year, and he says it's been the weirdest year in college ever. So hopefully it's going to be a little bit next year.
Thank you. And I too want to add my appreciation to you. The few times that I was able to join in the conversation, I was so impressed. And so I made a list, and I'll pare it down a little bit, but I made a list of my key takeaways from this year's experience. As has been mentioned, we had a larger group this year, and it was really so informative to have the multiple perspectives and to have that broadening of input and perspective. And I was so impressed when we talked about quality of instruction. As you each shared your thoughts, I could picture what those classrooms looked like. And I was impressed with the how appreciative and empathetic the students were of the significant sacrifices and efforts that their teachers had made this year. You guys noticed and you appreciated it, and you gave some really good kudos to your teachers, as well as you shared some things that maybe could be improved upon. And I appreciate that. And one of the things I wrote down when you're talking about instruction is that the best, most meaningful instruction happens when there's passion application of the topic, understanding and connecting the concepts to your world, to the student's world, and that there's responsiveness and feedback given when a student puts forth effort. And I just thought that was so wise and insightful. And I want the administration to take that as they prepare professional development opportunities for our teachers. And I thought it was also very insightful as you described the relationships in your student body and yourselves and your peers with the school administrators and other staff at the school. And I could feel that that appreciation that you have for the custodians, for the librarians at your school, and the impact that they're making in your experience. And so I feel like as a district, we need to recognize all of the touch points that students have with adults in the building and how important that is to the experience. And then I have two more points. And I wrote this down straight from my notes, and I don't know who said it, but someone said the love of learning is often lost with the rush towards compliance. And I thought, that is really wise. And that is something that I'm going to keep thinking about. And I think that's something as the district moves forward that we need to remember to not lose sight of the love of learning. And then finally, I'll go back to the first meeting. The first meeting, we asked each of you to share with us if you could have any superpower, what would it be? And it was if you remember that, it was a very interesting list. Some things were repeated, others were very unique. But each one of those, I was impressed because each one of those desires for a superpower was focused on doing more to make the world a better place and to serve others. And I just feel like that is a great indication of the young people that we have here in our district. You were representative of thousands of students, and I just really believe that our future, our world we're going to be all right because you guys are going to lead out, and you do have superpowers. They may not be exactly how you described or thought of them, but you will make this world a better place. And so thank you very much for your service. Appreciate you. So now it's picture time.
Yeah, that's fine with that. Let's have you guys stand around front.
Oh, that was great. Good reminder why we're here. So thank you. Okay, next we will do the report from USBA, and we will ask our representative to the USBA Board of Directors, Mont Millerberg.
Turn that on. We met last Friday. And whenever we meet, I would like to be able to come back and just quickly brief our board what the USBA directors came up with. The first thing that is on my list, and Susan, I'm glad you're here because you can probably jump on it because I'm kind of naive in this stuff. But first thing they talked about was governance. And supposedly, and Amber, you probably know more about this too because you were in the legislative session a lot. But supposedly at the very end of the legislative session, there was a bill that they started talking about that would give the legislature the ability to overturn decisions made by local boards. And that causes great concern amongst local school board members. And so I just want to put that out there and say, put that on your radar screen as we move into next year, because we're going to want to be very, very much aware of that. The delegate and pre-delegate, or the pre-delegate and delegate assembly will be in August on the 20th and 21st. So those involved in that may want to put that on your calendar. They are doing a new thing this year that they're doing a leadership series. I don't know if anybody's seen anything about that. They had a handout they gave to each of us, and they're asking different boards across the state to conduct leadership development series. The first one will be on April 28th at 7 to 8 p.m. And it will be presented by the Box-Elder Board of Education. They've got Nancy Kennedy, former USBA president and Box-Elder school board member, and John Robinson, president, Davis School of the Davis School Board. And that will be the first one. And I think that may be something that we want to look at. They will be covering board ethics and board roles and responsibilities. So if you want to mark your calendar for the 28th of April, that will be there for that. And now, drum roll please, this is kind of my favorite. Every second year, USBA does what they call their Leadership Academy. The dates on that will be September 16, 17, 18, and it will be up in Midway. I've been reassigned. I sit on the planning committee for the leadership committee. In the past, this has been a smaller event, and they are limiting our participation to where each school board in the state will be able to have 3 people go. Okay. Now we're kind of fortunate because as a committee member for that program, I get to go and it doesn't count. As the USBA president, Amber gets to go and that doesn't count. And so that leaves 3 others that will be able to go on that. It's shaping up to be a great activity. I'll be honest with you, I have enjoyed the Leadership Academy more than any other thing the USBA does. It's a great opportunity. They get some really great speakers. They cover very good topics. Holly, they want to put an emphasis in there for new board members. So if I were you and it meets your time frame, I would lobby hard to be one of those 3. And I think those are the 4 items I wanted to cover. Anything, Amber, you can think of that?
No, other than the delegate assembly, did we ever decide our delegates? And also, just so you know, it will be held at the Canyons District, so you
Same as
guys
last year.
will know where it is. But yeah, we do need to decide our delegates, I think, at some point. Yeah.
August 20th and
21.
21st. And it's evening of August 20th and morning of August 21st.
Right. And I think I'm the delegate. One of the delegates. And I think Amanda's the other delegate.
You guys were last time, but each year, I mean, we should have actually, if we had the conference, we would have decided the delegates there, and we didn't have the
Yeah,
conference.
I think we decided not to decide and let it flow through.
Hey, thank you. Thank you for that report. All right, board, I would like to spend a few minutes talking about the proposed meeting schedule for the 2022-2023 school year. And yes, that's hard to believe. We're looking at those years at this point, but it really is a little over a year from now. So we try and stay about 15 or 18 months ahead on approving our schedules. And hopefully you've got a chance to look through this. And I have a couple of things that I want to bring to your attention, and then I'll ask if you have any comments or questions about it. So traditionally, our board does not meet on Election Tuesday in November. However, in 2022, November 1st, which is the first Tuesday, is actually not Election Day, because Election Day is the first Tuesday after the first Monday in November. So Election Day that year would be November 8th, which then allows us to meet on the 1st and the 15th of November. And then also I want to draw your attention in December and January that what we have outlined here is December 6th, which would be a regular meeting. And then January 3rd would be a board member swearing in ceremony, because that would be the January following an election year. And then, so business meeting would not then take place until January 17th. And that's about a 6-week period of time, which could present a little bit of a problem for the administration if we have some business to do. So I would like to recommend that we consider adding a meeting on December 20th that would, or no, December 20th, which would be primarily just for consent items as needed by the administration. And hopefully nothing like a ongoing pandemic at that point in time will necessitate more than that business. So December of 2022, yes. And well, we'll take care of that problem. And then also March of 2023. So as we move into the new year, there's a meeting scheduled on March 7th and March 21st. And again, traditionally, our board doesn't meet on the evening of caucus meetings. However, there are no caucus meetings in the odd years. So there would not be a caucus meeting that year. So that's why the 21st should work. And finally, towards the end of June, we've traditionally held our roundtable discussion. And I would like to propose that maybe we just keep it as listed as study session and business meeting. And as we get a little bit closer, we can determine if June really is a good time for the roundtable. I know this last couple of years, we've handled it a little bit differently than we had in previous years. And I think coming out of actually heading into strategic planning and coming out of that process, we just may want to look at how we want to do roundtables in the future. So those are my thoughts. And now I will turn it over to you if you have any questions or comments. And then we'll talk about it, and then we'll make whatever adjustments, and then hopefully bring this back onto the consent agenda for next meeting for approval. Mrs. Shill.
So I'm just looking at the academic calendar for the 22-23, and the 20th is during Christmas break. Like there's no school. So are administrators working that day? We just may want to move it to the 13th because otherwise we're getting into people's Christmas vacation, I think, unless they're planning to work that day.
And I
Okay,
have a
thank you.
thought that way. If,
Nybar?
oh, sorry. Thank you. Sorry. I thought you nodded. I have a thought that way. If maybe we could look at January 10th instead of the December or January 24th as a thought to make up for that January 3rd where it's the swearing in.
Okay, so I would recommend not the January 24th because I guess what I'm trying to get at is the gap of time between December 6th and when we would meet again to conduct business.
Okay.
So, but January 10th would lessen that gap. Other thoughts or ideas on that? Can you, sorry, Mr. Milliberg, can you? do
I
your
would, I
microphone?
would rather look at December 13th, which is immediately before winter break.
Mrs. Oaks?
That would be my preference as well.
Okay. Mr. Wrigley, any thoughts? December 13th. And Mrs. Nybar, are you okay with that then? Where it's not in break yet?
Yeah, my only hesitation is I know that's the week traditionally that the basketball team, we host a tournament and the parents volunteer a lot. So it might be a little tricky for me because it's required for parents to fill different positions. So that's why I'm trying to avoid that week before Christmas break. But I'm happy to go ahead and commit to that. And then if there's an issue, maybe I can Zoom call or figure out something.
Okay, and at this point, the intent of that meeting would be just to conduct whatever necessary business and on the consent agenda that might arise at that point.
Another idea is I know we have had board meetings on nights of swearing in if we needed to just do a short consent meeting on the 3rd. I don't know. That's just another idea to throw out, but we
Okay.
could do
mean,
the
we're-
13th. And
Yeah, we're still a couple of, almost 2 years out from this, but how about if we put on the schedule the 13th and then as if it is determined that it's not necessary and whatever business could be handled on the 3rd, then we could make that adjustment when it gets a little closer. Does anyone have objection to that? Okay. Any other thoughts on any of those other dates or?
In 2023, when is MLK Day?
Well, that would probably be January 16th.
16th?
Which, I mean, we've usually met on the Tuesday following that
yeah,
holiday.
16th. It is the 16th.
Okay.
Any other thoughts or questions? Okay, we will, I'll ask Cindy to make some of those adjustments and then we will bring it back at our next board meeting on consent agenda for formal approval. Okay, thank you. That concludes that item. Next is policy updates. And we have it separated into two different items. One is some policies that are updates that are required by recent legislation. And then the other one are some regular policy updates that have come from our policy committee. So we'll turn the time over to Mr. Jeff Christensen.
Thank you. Thank you, President Tingy. So there are two policies for legislative updates. And you can see them, and there's a memo on board docs as well as a PowerPoint presentation. The two are our immunization policy. The first change here is that a bill was passed that for schools that offer both online and in-person instruction, a student cannot be denied an in-learning option if they have a medical or personal exemption. What we've done is added that language to our immunization policy to align with the statute. In our attendance policy, there are 3 bills that add additional provisions to our current attendance policy. And as outlined in the policy changes, they have added 2 additional lines for valid excuses. Illness, which was there previously, has had additional language added where regardless whether it is a mental or physical illness, the school cannot request documentation from a medical professional. That's one bill. And then the other bill adds mental or behavioral health of a school child to a valid excuse. So those have both been added to our valid excuse in the policy. And then the third bill addresses truancy enforcement moratorium. That means during the period from now till January or June of 2022, the truancy provisions in our policy will be in moratorium in terms of sending compulsory education violations to the court. What we've done is added the new language to the policy, and then our internal documents for principals will be updated with our exhibits regarding the moratorium. So questions on the legislative update? This is for first reading.
Any questions, board? Mr. Bigley.
I guess my question probably for the superintendent, how are these going to affect our operations? I mean, already it's difficult to get kids into school. I know we have to put these in the policy, but what are we going to do to try to offset some of the handcuffs they put on us with these policies?
So attendance has been this last year in our responsive services department. I know there has been some change in the name, looking at equity. We've already had internal discussions. A lot of the procedures we've had in terms of attendance during this COVID year have been somewhat in moratorium because we haven't been issuing truancy notices. So that will remain the same. I think our encouragement in terms of issuing letters to try to encourage attendance will remain the same. This will require some updates in our Skyward system. There will be ongoing conversations as this moratorium is in place for all schools. I don't have any additional information. BJ or Rick wants to add.
Thank you, Jeff. Real quick on that, I mentioned in the update, this was a topic at state superintendent meeting. So I don't remember the Senate bill, but the moratorium on referring students to juvenile court was extended, I believe, to 2022, if I remember. So, and I mentioned this before, and just for the record, the concern there is, and the superintendents are organizing on this to try to get some change there, but it's not so much that sending students to juvenile court is the first option or first intervention that's ever used. We know our principals in our schools utilize many interventions prior to that, but it really serves as a backstop for the main reason that to really get these services activated for students that need those, that are have habitual truancy issues. They have to be referred to juvenile court to initiate those types of supports. And so without that, that obviously becomes increasingly difficult to get those services assigned to those students. So we'll see how that plays out, but it is, I think with this policy, as we discuss this, we're going to have to take a different approach in how we intervene and how we provide those services and supports versus, you know, in the past, really relying on the court system to activate those interventions. So just heads up on that, we'll keep working on it, but that moratorium is in place at least through the next school year. So
Jeff, if you'll go up one page.
Yeah.
If you look on the first bullet point down under 1, and you read through that, you've got a school sage child. I don't know if that means it's a school smart kid or if that should be, if that's a typo.
So sage, they're very sagacious. So yeah, school age child.
It's a very sage student. Lots of wisdom there.
And there is, and to the attendance thing, attendance will still be monitored and classwork and makeup work and all of that will still be required. So I think this is just something that, as far as the change in the policy, it's something to recognize that mental health issues often are a factor in whether or not a child or a student feels like coming to school that day is in their best interest or and so I think that's the purpose of this change. And then the truancy thing is hopefully a temporary thing, but it might help identify, like superintendent said, some interventions and some ways that we can get those supports to students sooner. And anything else?
Am I the only one that worries about abuse of that? Because I know that if I was in high school, every time that it snows overnight and it was a blue day, I'd be taking a mental health day.
Well, again,
And
yeah, I mean, there's still classwork and makeup work and things like that that would still be required. So.
exactly,
Mhm.
I'd still be up there.
Okay, any other questions or thoughts on this? Okay, on these two, then we'll plan to bring them back at the next meeting with, as a second reading with possible action.
Thank you,
Okay,
Kristen.
thank you.
The other items in the policy update for this evening, there are 4 policies that are listed. And I'll start with the first one, which is our student clubs. This is also in many respects in alignment with state statute for terms and conditions that needed to be updated in our definitions. So we've updated the terms for monitor, sponsor, and supervisor to align with state statute. And then in a couple areas in the policy, we've updated some language dealing with how we will deal with non-curricular clubs in our schools, again, to align with statute. But also the policy committee discussed use of their school facilities and have added some language for that policy. Again, this is for first reading. The board also added an additional requirement that as part of the application for a club, that they would encourage the club to engage in service at the school community in building and encouraging citizenship. So we've added a requirement to the application for clubs as it's reviewed. Those are the modifications to the club policy. The protection for athletes with student head injuries had a minor revision to include emerging sports as allowed by the Utah High School Activities Association. And then we just reorganized where the definitions were. 2 additional policies were updated to allow for our students that are special education students. One is our graduation requirement policy to add an additional diploma for special education students. Specifically, this is diploma for those students with significant cognitive disabilities who are accessing core standards through essential elements. So on board docs, there's an exhibit that outlines the requirements for what the student would be required to complete. And so that's a modification to the graduation policy. And then the last one is our work-based learning policy. And this also allows, according to state board rule, special education students can receive additional credentials based on the state board rule, and an exhibit is added showing how those would be applied and accrued. So all of these are for first reading. I can answer questions regarding each one.
Any questions, board? I just wanted to make one little kind of restate what you mentioned about the student clubs and the desire for those clubs to encourage those values of community and citizenship. It's part of our discussion was about including it in the application process for the club to identify ways that they could fulfill some of those. and not necessarily a requirement that they do each and every one of those things, but just how it aligns with the vision and the purpose of having extracurricular activities. It's just a way of getting them to be thoughtful, and we felt like most clubs do align with those priorities, but a way for them to be thoughtful and express those. Okay, Mrs. Nybauer.
And I also think it's a great place in student life to be, you know, the learning environment for when they go on into their adult lives with different civic organizations or community organizations, that there's always a thought of how to better the community around you. So I'm really excited about that change and feel like it helps us kind of define a little more what we hope our students involved in any club or organization, something more that they can get out of it as well.
Okay, so again, we will bring these back as second reading and possible action. So if you have any additional feedback for the policy committee, please contact Mr. Christensen on that.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. That concludes the items in our study session. And before we begin business meeting, I would like to maybe just give the board about a 5-minute break, and then we'll begin our business session. Hey, I think we're ready to begin. I guess I'm just kind of looking for a signal from our tech people. Are we good? Okay, thank you. I'd like to welcome all of you to the meeting, the business portion meeting of the Canyons Board of Education. Today is April 20th, 2021. And we are meeting at the district office located at 9361 South, 300 East in Sandy, Utah. And we appreciate those of you that have joined us in person and those of you that are participating via the live stream. And I'd like to excuse Mrs. Clarine Arnold, who is not with us this evening. And our first item is to approve the agenda for today, April 20th, 2021. I will ask for a motion to approve that agenda.
I'll make a motion to approve the agenda for today, April 20th, 2021.
Thank you. Is there a second to that motion?
I'll second it.
Thank you. Any discussion to the motion? Seeing none, I'll call for a vote. All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? That motion passes. Thank you. And now we will be led in the Pledge of Allegiance by Kirsten Stewart, Associate Director of Communications.
If I can ask everyone to please rise and recite the Pledge of Allegiance after me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America.
Thank you. We will now turn time over to Jeff Haney and Kirsten Stewart from the Communications Department for some recognitions.
Thank you, President Tingy. We appreciate the time that the board gives us every single month to recognize the achievements of students, faculty, and staff in the Canyon School District. Tonight for our recognitions, we are celebrating scholars and champions in our community. Those who are mentioned tonight will receive a letter of recognition from the Board of Education and the superintendent, as well as a Canyons District keychain. Now, some of our honorees are sitting behind me tonight. This is one of the first times that we've had folks who we are recognizing at board meeting, and I can't think of better people to be recognized here at board meeting for the first time this school year. They are becoming college ready, both in their brains and their bank accounts. They are the recipients of the Canyons Education Foundation's My 529 College Saving Account. So congratulations to the scholarship winners, Catherine Layla Polly from Indian Hills Middle, Uriah Sunshine Oram from Mount Jordan Middle School, Baragay Z from Mount Jordan Middle, Sky Woods, Mount Jordan Middle, and Cody Sue, Midvale Middle. Let's give them all a round of applause. If any of those students are here, do you want to come up and stand right next to me? Who's here? Uriah, is that your name? Uriah Sunshine. Okay. Your name? Ah, you stand right here, please. The Canyons Education Foundation, as you know, is the fundraising arm of the district and the organization that does so much good for our students and our teachers. And every year, the foundation selects 7th graders who, along with their parents, enter an essay contest to receive a $500 scholarship in a My 529 account to be used for college after they graduate from Canyons District high schools. Now, parents can contribute to the My 529 account, and they will grow tax-free to someday pay for tuition and fees and books and all the good stuff that goes along with going to college. The scholarships are for students with parents who, for whatever reason, did not graduate from college, but want their kids to have that opportunity. Now, this year, the 5 students that I mentioned, including the 3 behind me right now, they will receive a certificate from the Canyons Education Foundation for the $500. It will be deposited into the 529 account, and it will be available when they are ready to go to college. Now you're going to go to college, is that right? Yes? Okay. How about you guys? Yes? Okay. The recipients come from various locations in the district. They have diverse backgrounds. As part of their essays, the students were asked questions like, what movie, book, or quote or person inspired them? Some of the essays included the following. A student said, if you ever feel like giving up, remember why you kept holding on. And this, the movie Breadwinner is a story about a sweet girl from Afghanistan that experiences hardship, and it helps me understand the safety and worth I have here in America. And here's another quote from a parent. I believe if my child pursues an education, it will be the chance we never got. Coming to this country was a chance that our children wouldn't have to experience the hardships we went through. I believe that education is important to learn something, but also to act on it. They have the chance to make a difference in our society and to change the world. The Canyons Education Foundation is pleased to provide an early incentive to these students to reach their goal of attending college. So congratulations to our My 529 College Savings Account Scholarship winners this year. Let's give them a round of applause. Now, did you receive your certificates? Yes. And Denise, we're going to have a photo of all of them with members of the Board of Education. You all want to come down so that we can have a photo, or how would you like this? Yeah, come on down, person. Yeah, come on down. We can do it right here. Congratulations, and we can't wait to hear where you guys go to college when you graduate from high school. Our next honorees are the Canyons District students who are first place winners in career and technical student organization competitions. Student leadership organizations are an integral element of all successful CTE programs. These organizations provide experience for students in leadership and management skills, and the students have the opportunity to display the skills that they have learned in their courses by completing in their areas of expertise. Competitions are held every year, regionally, across the state, and at national levels, and our students do well every year in these competitions. The following are Canyon students who have won first place in their categories in this year's competitions. From Corner Canyon High School, Emerald Spencer for Independent Business Plan. From Corner Canyon, Caleb Chang in Entrepreneurship Series. From Hillcrest High School, Pooja Iyer in Franchise Business Plan. Hillcrest High School's Victoria 2 Franchise Business Plan. They worked as a team. Hillcrest High School's Annika Balakrishnan in the Entrepreneurship Program, and Hillcrest High School's Helen Rady for the Entrepreneurship Program. And that's for our DECA students. For our FBLA students from Alta High School, Emily Erickson took first place in e-business, organizational leadership, supply chain management, and word processing. Hillcrest High School's Alexander Elbel in coding and programming. Hillcrest High's Amber Parker in introduction to social media strategy. Hillcrest's Annika Balakarishnana in banking and financial systems. Hillcrest's Helen Rady in banking and financial systems and journalism. Hillcrest's Il Hua Heng in accounting 1 and 2 on computer program solving. And Hillcrest's Michael Chen, introduction to social media strategy. Pooja Iyer from Hillcrest in business financial plan. Rashita Shivamakumar in networking infrastructures. Sneha Abhinavan from business law. Sovia Movizanari from Hillcrest High School, introduction to business procedures. Hillcrest High's Soma Paritala, introduction to social media strategy. And Hillcrest Victoria 2, business financial plan. For FCCLA competitions from Alta High School, Rachel Jefferson in food innovations. From Brighton High School, Sierra West, the master advisor. Jordan High School's Mackenzie West in fashion construction level 2. And an HOSA from Alta High School, Julia Coleman in nursing assisting. From Corner Canyon, Jillian DeCiana, physical therapy. From Corner Canyon High School, Nicole Nee, medical forensics. Corner Canyon High School's Emily Yin, medical forensics. And from CTech, Nami Robinson in home health aid. From Hillcrest High School, Zubadiah Kadir, CPR. And Hillcrest High School's Sarah Al-Dalimi in CPR. In Skills USA, Alta High School's Aiden Holyoke in 3D visualization and animation. From Alta High School, Atticus Snow, 3D visualization and animation. And from Alta High School, Madigan Workman in cosmetology. That's quite a list of our CTE students who have won first place in their state competitions in their area of expertise. We also congratulate Mindy Robison, the principal of Midvale Middle School, who has been named the State School Administrator of the Year by the UACT, and that's the Organization for CTE in Utah. So congratulations to all of our CTE students, faculty, and administrators for supporting career and technical education in Canyon School District. I also wanted to mention that Principal Doug Graham from Indian Hills Middle School is here to support his students. This is the type of administrator that we have in the Canyon School District. So thanks to Mr. Graham for being here to support the warriors of the other students at Indian Hills Middle School. So congratulations for all the people that we have recognized today. They are those who help us make Canyons District into a world-class school district. Thank you, President Tingy. We appreciate the time. We turn the time back to you.
President. can I say
Thank
something?
you.
Can I take just a second?
Sure. Mr. Millerberg.
I just want to say how excited I am for the recipients of the 529 certificates. I will go back, and I don't know what inspired you to want to go to college. I don't have a clue what your inspiration is. I am a first-generation college graduate. And I'll go back to probably about 1959. I was sitting in fourth grade at Midvale Elementary School, and my fourth grade teacher talked to me about going to college and what a difference it would make in my life. And I will be eternally grateful for that gentleman that inspired me to do that. So take that certificate, plan on doing something. It will change your life. And you know, the poet Robert Frost in the Road Not Taken, the last stanza is, and that has made all the difference. And that's how I feel about being able to go to college. It has made all the difference. So good luck to you.
Thank you. And congratulations to you and to all of those that have participated in the CTE programs as well. It's always wonderful to celebrate the amazing achievements of students.
Yeah, President Tingy, if I may.
Yes.
The Canyons Education Foundation has one more sweet treat for the students who received those scholarships tonight. On the way out, they'll receive a box of crumble cookies. So we wanted to not just give them money, but to give them some dough as well. So I know. So mom and dad, I would take away those cookies and the kids are going to be up until about midnight. But congratulations to those students again. And thank you to Denise Haycock, the development officer of the Canyons Education Foundation and the Canyons Education Foundation Board for providing this opportunity for our students. And don't forget your cookies on the way out.
And if mom and dad don't want you to have the cookies, you're welcome to bring them to me.
Wonderful. Thank you. And you're welcome to stay. We'd love to have you participate in the rest of our meeting, but if you'd like to go and get to those cookies and other things that we know that you have, you're welcome to do that as well. We've now come to the public comment portion of our board meeting. The Board of Education encourages public engagement and values input from students, parents, employees, and other patrons of the district. I will briefly review a few of the guidelines for public comments. Comments are part of the record of the meeting, and the comment time is determined by the board president, and with usually an individual will receive 3 minutes, and those representing a group could speak for 6 minutes. And the if you have any written documents that you would like to submit to the board, please give them to the board secretary, Cindy, who's right over here on the side at the side of the room. And the Board of Education does not engage in public comment on personnel issues of a district employee's character, professional competence, or mental or physical health. If a member of the public wants to comment on personnel issues, the board requests that those comments be submitted to the board in writing. However, if the member of the public determines to verbally comment on personnel issues, his or her comments need to be civil and refrain from personal attacks, insults, defamatory, or slanderous comments about an individual. We've had one person sign up to address the board this evening here in person, and it's my understanding that no one has signed up to participate by telephone. So the patron, Mr. Jeff Wingad, has signed up to address us. And so if you would come forward, and hopefully I said your name correctly, but would you state your name in the microphone for the record?
Yes, very good. Thank you. And I just want to say to the board, thank you for not having discrimination against age for hiring people. I find that's fabulous. As long as we're healthy and we have our mental faculties and pass medical tests, then we're good to go. And it's great working here. I have a concern that I'll get to in just a minute, and I've highlighted some things just to share the highlights. And then I'll send this white paper to Cindy so that the board may review more in depth the things they feel that they want to review. First of all, I don't hold any office. I'm not seeking an elected position. My professional career includes engineering project management, risk management, database statistical analysis. I worked with Dr. Edwards Deming on a number of large companies, and we were credited with saving hundreds of millions of dollars of operational costs. I see some opportunities here in the school district, and that's another subject for another day. The government website administrated by the CDC, the FDA, and the HHS agencies, the Human Health Services agencies, have provided a public reporting system for vaccine adverse effects, and the URL is in this paper. I believe that this information should be shared with those considering vaccine, COVID vaccinations, so people can make an informed consent. And I believe this will help the district mitigate any risk providing the vaccinations. Right now, presently, there's a lawsuit that has been served in California against the school district for giving the vaccinations without the risk accompanying the vaccination. So that's a potential exposure we have, and I'm concerned about that. The following words are words of vaccine experts that are also in this report. And the first one is a retired VP of Pfizer. He has 40 years in this field of vaccines. And he stated to the frontline doctors just recently, a few weeks ago, that, and this is Dr. Michael Yaden, former VP of Pfizer, says experimental COVID-19 vaccines could be used for mass scale depopulation. Now, I know this is a pretty radical statement. These are not my words. This is a man that's been in this industry for 40 years. And so he goes on to say that he agrees with Dr. Gert Vanden Bossche, who is also a vaccine expert and whistleblower that has worked with the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation and many other major vaccine manufacturers, because that's what he does. He has appealed to the World Health Organization and his vaccine colleagues to immediately stop the Chinese vaccination campaign. Dr. Yeden and Dr. Bossche both of them say that the Chinese virus shots are pathologically priming the injection for sudden death syndrome from the Kaido storms that will occur 6 months to a year after the vaccinations have been given.
Okay, so we've reached your 3 minutes. If you could wrap it up, please.
I'm sorry?
We've reached the 3 minutes, so if you could
Okay.
wrap it up.
All
Thank
right,
you.
well, I'll send this paper in and I just would ask that they look at these vaccine experts and some of the warnings and how we mitigate our risk here in the district. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so I don't see anyone else that has signed up for public comment. So that will conclude our public comment time for this evening. Okay, our next item is our consent agenda. Item 7, I will ask for a motion on the consent agenda, and in making that motion, please read each of the items listed on that agenda.
Okay, I will do that. I move to approve the consent agenda. Item A, approval of minutes from March 31st, 2021. Item B, approval of hire and termination reports. Item C, approval of purchasing bids. I am removing item D at the school's request. And then item E, approval of March financial reports, and item F, approval of addendum to Union Middle Detention Basin interlocal agreement with Sandy City.
Okay, thank you. Is there a second to the motion?
I'll second that.
Thank you. Any discussion to the motion? All right, so I will just repeat that item 7D has been removed from consideration, so it will not be approved if the motion passes. All right, seeing no discussion, I'll call for a vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion passes. Thank you. Okay, next, item 8A is a report from the Long Range Planning Committee. I will turn time over to Mr. Leon Wilcox, Business Administrator.
Thank you, President Tingy. Since I've been on a roll lately, I will ask if I have some jokes about roofs, if you'd like to hear any. And the first one's on the house. I know how Jerry Seinfeld feels now. Let me.
Is there a website that has all the worst jokes on it that you read?
I do. I do. Yeah. Uh, with, with, just so the board knows, we met last week as a long-range planning committee, and Holly, Amber, and Mont, of course, are the board representatives on the committee. And if you have anything to add as I go through, please do so. With COVID this year, we've been focused on short-term planning, just keeping schools open and dealing with all the issues with that. And so we haven't really met as a long-term planning committee since last summer. Again, just mainly focused, that's been our sole focus, is keeping and getting schools and keeping them open. And so as our numbers decrease and as vaccinations roll out in a more, continue to roll out in a quickly manner, we have resumed the long range planning committee. We discussed several topics we'll need to discuss in the future. We'll review those with you here. We didn't have time to discuss any of those, but you can just see what's on our plate in the next coming months and even years as we keep planning. But also there is one issue that we would like you to at least bring to your attention and get your input on this as we go forward. And I will have I think the best way is I'll go through, I have about 10 slides. I'll go through and present all these. Then I'd like BJ and Dr. Robbins to come up and review the program in detail with you, if that's okay. One of the things that we're looking at is to create a permanent location for our elementary and middle school youth academies. Right now, we've had the Bridges program over at Jordan Valley. We've since disbanded that and moved that into Mid-Valley, where we have our youth academy program right now for the elementary. We know Mid-Valley is not a long-term solution for that because of the DLI program and because of the possible boundary adjustment there. But it will serve as a short term for the next little while. But one of the things with the Bridges Academy, with the academy, is we want to have access for these kids to access to their peers in the same age. So that's why we have the academy at Mid-Valley, so they can access that. BJ can explain that far more here in a minute. But we also want to look at something that's central in the district, so all our students can access it better that way, and also make sure we provide the adequate supports. One of the things that we're looking at is possibility, and I didn't draw it out here, but is doing a little add-on addition to the Glacier Hills Elementary School that's currently being built. If you've been over there, Mid-Valley is basically, Edgemont is basically been demolished now. Just couple of the wings are left standing, but you approved this a couple months ago, this building here. And one of the suggestions is we'd build a wing out here on the east side. Again, I'll point up here, point back there. See there's a playground right there. We would actually remove that and look at building a small permanent location out there to house this program. Here's how it could look. This is was a quick rendering by one of our architects. He's actually here tonight, Scott Lader with MHTN. So we'd have a couple classrooms there, a couple sensory rooms, some offices, and collaboration where parents could come in. This could be sealed off right here. So if there's issues, we could just block this off from the rest of Glacier Hills, but also have access in and out. A main entrance coming in as well to just this pod here. It'd be about 9,800 square feet there. Some of the issues with this, the cost would be about, we're guessing in the $3.1 million range. In addition to that, and that's a big issue right there, is the cost. In addition, it would be about $158 to design this, to do all the architect designs and the engineering layout as well. So that would have to be added on again as well, $158,000. The only way we could fund this would be issuing more lease revenue bonds. We know we have to issue, we were looking at 32 to 35 million for Peruvian Park and Glacier Hills. We'd have to increase that by $3 million there. And our budgets for this year that we're finishing out in FY22 would determine that, and also the bond market premium at the time. One of the issues that we have is Glacier Hills, as you approved that back in, it was actually in January. We've gone out and fabricated the steel, ordered all of that. There's now been a big backup on steel. They're about 6 months out, 6 to 8 months out on steel. There's also rationing concrete. So Glacier Hills would be done in August of 22. However, this addition would be about 4 to 5 months later. It wouldn't be, we don't think we'd have that complete until January of 23, just because of the delay in getting materials there. Just so you know, the Middle and Youth School Academy, we would look at, both of those are housed at CTech right now. We would look to move the middle school over to Eastmont due to the size of the building, and we have some available classrooms there. We don't think we'd need to make many modifications to that building, but we're still doing some reviews, but we think any updates would be minor. The high school program, again, is at CTech. That would remain with Diamond Ridge. We do intend to eventually move Diamond Ridge into the Bellevue building there. One of the things that we look at is building some synergy, some support here, where you see Lily as the main thing, but you can see Bellevue there, future home of Diamond Ridge. Up here is Glacier Hill, so that would be the high school program. The elementary program there at Glacier Hills, and then the middle school program there at Eastmont. So BJ could shift staff back and forth as needed between these. And also, we feel like this area right here is probably about as central in Canyon School District as we'll get with those 3 schools right there. Just want to shift topics. In our meeting, we didn't spend much time talking about these due to focusing on this other issue at the time. But here's some things that we have planned out in the future as a long-term planning committee. One is the Midvale elementary boundaries. We've talked with you about that. Due to the COVID and unable to meet in person, we met with our principals, and they really feel like, and we do, and we completely agree, that in-person meetings to describe and get all the input we need on any potential boundary shifts due to the Jordan Bluffs area in Midvale, we really need to have in-person meetings. So we're looking at delaying those until the fall, and then having those meetings and bring a recommendation back to you as the board to approve. That being said, we won't implement any recommendation until the 23-24 school year. We somewhat looked at doing something for the 22-23 school year, but we want to postpone that a year. We do think we have enough capacity in those schools right now to handle any growth in the Bluffs. We've received about 20 new students this year. We started out with about 40 elementary, and we're up to about 60. So we feel like we can accommodate that, as that we know the Bluffs is going to grow out over about a 5-year period. So we feel like we have time with that. As we've mentioned, we would like to move Diamond Ridge into the Bellevue campus. We really want the board to approve that though before it happens. So we're bringing that back to you here probably in the fall for your official vote. We'll have to make some modifications to that building. We'll go over a 2 to 3 year period. Did we want to discuss that West Draper Elementary and the timeline for that? The timeline could impact the amount of lease revenue bonds that we need. We also have property in East Draper, 11.6 acres there on 17th East, if you're aware of that, and possibly selling that. Other things, we've had our facilities go do an updated FCI or facilities condition index for all buildings. We want to review that and go over things that could be things that we need to be aware of as we plan out in the future. Long-term improvements, mainly to transportation in Eastmont going forward over a period of years. The Crescent View building, of course, housing 2 elementaries this year, well, right now and then next year, but the future use of that building. The prison, Amanda's been serving on the point committee, how that will impact us and our student impact, CTech and other school boundaries and other items that you as the board may want to have the committee review. So Again, we didn't really talk about any of these in depth due to the time that we plan to address all these. We always have far more needs than dollars, but we'll see what we can do in these going forward. So with that, I think it'd be best if I have BJ come up and discuss the program and the issues that we're having right now and the need for that.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Weller.
Thank you. First of all, I just wanted to say that I'm really proud of the work that our staff have put together, the Youth Academy. We started that 3 years ago. We put secondary students on the Diamond Ridge campus, 6th grade through 12th grade. And at the same time, we created the Bridges program with special education and housed that at Jordan Valley. Both programs ultimately ended up serving kind of two different purposes. In our secondary program, we served students who had committed a safe school violation, or we were serving students who were in state custody, either through DCFS or JJS, or maybe they were on a long-term home and hospital, a hospitalization. And this ended up becoming like an intervention program and a recovery program, kind of as like a step down before they return to their boundary school. Because many times we found that during that process, students were not quite prepared to go from a treatment center into a 2,000 student high school or a crowded middle school. It increased their anxiety, and they ended back up in treatment. And so these blended programs really have provided the students there with some positive role models, an opportunity to continue mental health treatment and supports, and for many of them getting caught up on missed credits, very successful. One of the challenges, especially for the middle school program, is that they have not had any access to their same age peers. So if we try to mainstream any students before they return back to their boundary school, the middle school students have not had that option. So that's why we're requesting them to be pulled from the Diamond Ridge campus and to create a specific middle school model. For the elementary, and just one point of clarification, the Bridges program is still functioning at Jordan Valley for the remainder of this school year. After this school year, we will dissolve that program and combine it with the youth academies, creating this year in January, we started at Midvale, the elementary youth academy, and with one classroom, and we'll expand that to 2 classrooms. One of the fascinating things when you're working with students who are struggling is that sometimes we see on the surface a behavior, a student in crisis, and we're quick to make judgments about this student. Like, this is a problem kid, they're disrupting our classroom, we don't know what to do with this kid. And with the Youth Academy, we've been in a unique situation where we have been able to provide these students with a stable environment where we're working with either their caseworker, or with a therapist, getting them stable and then helping them return successfully back to the classroom. We've had a couple of teachers tell us since January, y'all are miracle workers. Like, I never would have believed that this student would have been this successful in my classroom. And it's not just behaviors, because when you think of a student maybe who has experienced something horrific that none of us would ever think that we could survive from, whether it's abuse or violence right in their home, that, we think of fighting or flight or freezing, like all of the trauma responses. Sometimes these students would run from school and then they would hide, and staff are trying to find them in these programs where we can help them become stable and gain the skills necessary. And we're seeing a lot of success with that. It's not without challenge. It's not without, a lot of sweat and tears, but at the end of the day, it's the right thing to do. And having the elementary, middle, and high school program available for our students. I mean, some of the kids have gone through the worst things that you could think of. They're getting success, they're finding hope, and we're giving them a future. I think that's just really commendable. And I think it's definitely worth the investment.
Board, any comments or questions? Mr. Wrigley.
Yeah, I'm excited to have this move forward. Leon, we had toured this when this went up to, when we were looking at the models for Dershey Hills. This was an add-on that was up in, I think, in Davis School District where we were looking at it. And it made a lot of sense. I mean, we tried this before, we totally integrated into regular school, and that's why they're at Jordan Valley. It just didn't work. So I think this is a good model if we're moving that direction.
So you toured it way back when
Yeah.
I was up there.
And a couple.
BJ went up Friday and he can walk through, yeah, BJ took those pictures for the Derek. We could just show you a couple of the inside ones. So this is, the outside obviously will blend in with the building.
And one of the things that's really important to us is that you create a classroom environment that is inclusive in the school building while still maintaining safety, because you don't want it to look like a detention center. You want them to be able to mainstream. You don't want them to be targeted and labeled, right? And so the layout of this building, I was really impressed. So when you walk in the building, this looks just like another one of the pods in the school. They have the double doors that you can close when you need to. Do you want to go to the next one? In there, they have classrooms, a sensory room, therapy room that you can do a lot of the treatment and support. You can have the outside caseworker come in and meet and work with the students and our staff in a private way that it's not, everybody doesn't know what's happening, but they're getting the supports that they need right here in the school. And then one more, Derek. So this is kind of a panorama view of the classroom. It's a little different, but within the classroom, you know, there's a bathroom, there's a wellness room, like a sensory room where they can de-escalate when they need to. It's a little bit smaller than a regular sized classroom. There's a storage room. So everything that you would need is right there in the classroom so that you don't have students running out into the hall, you know, to use the restroom. Like you can manage that within this space. And then the team of teachers and aides who are there all working together to support them on their plans.
So
it's very, very impressive setup. I was very, very.
Yeah. For this building, the building that we saw, this pod was on the total opposite side from the cafeteria. Is that the same thing in our building now? Or is this, it still is from the opposite? Because that was one of the issues I had, is that transfer. So you'd probably have to do a different time. The other concern, we really do need to work with the FCCs, and especially if we're going to Eastmont. I think they need to know, and we probably need to ask for a separate wing at Eastmont rather than, there maybe was separate entrance. The biggest issue, I've been over this population for years at the state level. The largest problems was coming in and out the same doors with the rest of the students. So if we put that in, there may, hopefully we be able to have a.
At the Eastmont location, the rooms that Principal Kurtzhals has identified for us is its own hallway. It is isolated. It has its own entrance. I don't think that you would need to build another wing. It's still separate enough. And then the other thing I just wanted to mention is that we still have working partnerships with community agencies for students who may need more intensive services that we're not able to fully provide in the schools. And so if we have a situation, you know, where a student needs that intensive support, we can still work with our community partners to make that.
Yeah, I do really encourage the FCCs. That was the issue we had in the last time we had these kids out. The FCCs were coming, parents didn't understand. So I think we need to explain the program to them, what's going on and how we're doing it. Now, I totally understand the integration. That's our model. We need to integrate, but how to do it in such a way it's safe for the students and for this bridge program also. Thank you.
So the Eastmont right now, they have in special ed, the ABS classroom clusters there. So this would be a support to that program already. I don't think, this is definitely not an ABS classroom.
Well, the nice thing about that probably is going to also give them a little extra staff. I mean, that's been the problem with their ABS program. They haven't always had the staff. So this will probably give them a benefit to them because we'll have more staff in case they need assistance. They'd be able to call on this program probably.
I would think of it as like a therapeutic classroom. Not just a behavior classroom, for sure.
Any other comments or questions on this? Okay, I think this is some really good information. I did have one question with this proposed plan here for the Glacier Hills edition, what kind of capacity, like how many students would this serve? And how does that line up with our current number of students that we're serving? And then it's my understanding that the elementary level, it's more of kind of a rotating thing. They come in, they receive the services and the help, and then hopefully, as you mentioned a few minutes ago, transition back to their classrooms.
Yeah, so all three programs are the same in that it's intervention based or recovery based. And so that timeline is just dependent on that treatment plan. And so the idea is, I think the shortest time they would be there is about 4 weeks, but it could be 8, 12, 16 weeks in this program while we get them stable to be able to return to the classroom. At any given time, each classroom could have 8 to 10 students. So, 16 to 20 students at each location. I think this last year we served, I'll have to double check the numbers, but 50 students at the high school level.
Not all at once, right?
No, just throughout the school year.
Throughout the year.
Yep. Transitioned in and out.
Mrs. Nybauer.
I was thinking that that would be a great detail to add when it's presented to school community councils, as well as the supportive staff that you have with the social workers and the child psychologists. Just because of previous experiences that some had at Sprucewood Elementary when it was there, so that there's reassurance that we have now developed this program further and we have all the support that we need.
Yeah, and one point of clarification with that, Sprucewood was an ABS cluster that then transferred right to Quail Hollow and East Sandy. And this program is not the ABS, but it is definitely a more comprehensive program. Yeah, but for sure.
Okay, so let me just, let's just talk for a minute about the timing and procedurally. So, and BJ, thank you for sharing that, and thank your team for all the great work they're doing. So there's this proposal as you've heard it, and it would need some board approval, but as Leon mentioned, we're kind of, the timing of things is a little tricky because of the delay in obtaining supplies. But then we'd also need to, I guess, engage in some specific design work as well. Would you like to address maybe possible steps or procedures
So
now?
the way I would see this is that the next board meeting, you would approve the fee proposal that said $158,000 from MHDN to go design this. I would also recommend that between now and that meeting on May 4th, we communicate, Jeff, Kirsten, to the SECs, particularly this billing, right? And I think Eastmont as well.
Eastmont's SEC is tomorrow, and we are planning to talk with them tomorrow.
Okay, that's good. So, and then bring that feedback, any feedback we have back to that May 4th meeting. It would then, then would take Scott and his team 6-8 weeks to design this, and then to bid that out, and then to give it to Hogan, who's the contractor there, to bid that out to get the supplies. Again, we're hoping again around that $3.1 million. Costs have varied, have really gone a little bit haywire here over the last month or so. So we're hoping that we think they've built that in, that they've told us they've built that in. And then we'd have to bring that back to you as a purchasing bid. I don't know if we'd have that by the June 8th meeting. That'd be pushing it. If not, we could bring it back on the July. We have a July meeting in there mid-July. I don't have the exact date, and have you approve it then too as well. But
And I believe there's a second meeting in June as well.
yeah, that was a round table, but we could have a business meeting there.
Yeah, I think we decided it wasn't going to be round table,
Oh,
but
okay.
could be a short business
Short
meeting.
business meeting. So we should have it by June. Yeah, I think that meeting was on June 22nd.
Yes.
So we should have it by then. They could then get going. They will not halt the progress on the current Glacier Hills. They'll have to keep going. And as we said, this addition would not be completed until probably January of 2023. It would have, the program would have to stay at Mid-Valley until then, and there is capacity to do that, yes. So is there any questions on that? That's how I would see the time.
Okay, Mr. Wrigley?
So we'd have to rebid this again? We wouldn't have the current contract? We could have two different contractors on the same?
No, it'd be the same contractor. We want the same contractor to do it because they're building the same thing out. So it would be Hogan Construction is doing Glacier Hills. Hogan Construction will do this and this addition.
Okay, so
Yeah,
they doesn't have to be bid out again, but they do have to give us a quote.
They have to go out, well, they have to go out and get bids from their
Bids from the
for
subcontractors
the
and stuff like
steel,
that.
the sheet rock, the foundation, the electrical, all that. And they'll get it from the subcontractors who are working there now. So it will just continue on.
Okay,
the
so we don't have
steel-
to start all over.
So, yeah, certainly not starting all over. So the
the
steel worker who's doing the steel on Glacier Hills will still do the steel on this one.
And I assume if that's the case, they're going to upgrade the HVAC and stuff, or just get his own HVAC.
And that's one thing we'll look at. We'll look at.
Because I mean, if we're building, we have to put a bigger unit in.
Yeah, we'll probably just put a single unit on this one because we've already mechanically engineered the building itself. So we think that would be the best. We don't want to do anything that's going to halt Glacier Hills because we're really up against a time crunch on that too. So to make sure that's open, because that's so imperative, because again, we're combining the two schools into that one. So we really need that one open in August of 22. So, but you know, that's what Scott and his team will do. Yeah.
Okay, board, so everyone comfortable with that procedure layout? Okay. And then, but speaking of SECs, so I'm glad that you'll be visiting Eastmont tomorrow, and then Bellevue and Edgemont, hopefully before our next board meeting, so you can report back on that. Okay. Great. Thank you. And we appreciate the work of that committee. And yeah, there's a long list. It seems like since we formed that committee, the list gets longer, even though we do check some things off every now and then. So thank you for that report. Next item, I will turn the time over to Superintendent Rick Robbins, who will give us an introduction to our upcoming strategic planning process. As you recall, last board meeting, we approved a contract for this, for a consultant with Education Elements. So we'll turn the time over to Superintendent Robbins.
Okay, thank you, President Tingy. First too, I just want to thank BJ and Leon for their work on, and the Long Range Planning Committee also for their efforts to help address the issue with Bridges and Youth Academy. So that's exciting to see that go forward. So I'll just take just a moment, and I'll let Anthony and Shelby talk a little bit about themselves, but I just want to introduce Education Elements as our consultant for the strategic vision. I'm absolutely thrilled that they were able to win the bid in the RFP process, and want to congratulate them, and also thank the board for all of your support and efforts in vetting the consultants. As you know, it was very competitive, but Education Elements really rose to the top in many ways. For me personally and professionally, the one thing that I would like to say about Education Elements is that they are very student-centered, and this goes back in their history. They're very grounded in personalized learning. They're very collaborative. They're really a team player for years. And I've said this to Anthony many times. It's uncommon to see education vendors be so willing to share all of their secrets, right? All of their work, all of their trade. And I know as a superintendent and as a school district, at any time over my career, or for that matter, any district in our country, they can reach out to Education Elements, and they're right there to support. So with that, I'm super excited to introduce both. I want to just share a little bit about Education Elements, and then I'll let Anthony Kim introduce himself. He's with us online, and then also Shelby McIntosh from Education Elements that will be their lead on this project. But Education Elements is a consulting firm that works with districts to build and support dynamic school systems that meet the needs of every learner today and tomorrow. They believe that schools grow when people grow. They take the time to understand the unique challenges school leaders face and then customize the Education Elements approach for each district. They have worked with hundreds of districts across the country, bringing deep expertise, design thinking, expert facilitation, and the spirit of collaboration, along with an extensive toolkit of resources and technology to deliver sustainable results. I think you can summarize that. For me, it's really about relationships. And that's something that I know is a priority for them. And I think they will be a tremendous fit as they work with us and help the board really see what can be as you look at the future and what the strategic vision might look like as we move the district forward and further that vision. So with that, I'll invite Shelby McIntosh up to the mic. And hi, Anthony online. So maybe we'll start with you, Anthony, if you want to introduce yourself and also introduce Shelby, we can do that. Can he talk? Can he? Okay, Anthony may not be able to talk to us. Sorry, Anthony. Okay, all right, Shelby's gonna go first.
Great. This is going to be a story I'll tell a long time if Anthony can't talk. My colleagues at Education Elements will love this story, but thank you so much for having me. I have to tell you, I've had the best time. I got here yesterday afternoon. I've been here all day. The team here at Canyons has made me feel so welcome. Jeff and Kirsten welcomed me last night, and I got to spend time with people like McKay and Alice and Amber today, learning so much about the district. I know how important this project is to you, and I feel just really grateful and honored that you're putting that project in our hands and trusting us with it. My excitement for the work has only grown over the day as I've learned more about you and met your team. So thanks again for having me here. While we'll work on Anthony, I'll tell you a little bit about myself. I am a former teacher. I've been in education my entire career. When I left the classroom, I moved to Washington, D.C., decided to study policy and did some policy research at the federal level for, I would say, 6-7 years, and then got really bored with how slow things move at the federal level and really wanted to make a more direct impact back in schools. And that's how I got into consulting. So really for the past 10-ish years, that's the work that I've been doing. I did, as a researcher, I got into stakeholder perception data really quickly as a consultant. And that was really where I started collecting a lot of stakeholder feedback, things like surveying and focus group, data collection and analysis, and then eventually realized districts and schools also need help knowing what to do with that data after I collected it for them. So naturally got into a lot of that consulting, and that's what led me here to Education Elements. That obviously has translated well into strategic planning work. I also do a lot of data culture work with our organization. And of course, as Superintendent Robbins said, a lot of personalized learning work, instructional design, things like that. Do we know if Anthony can introduce himself yet?
We think he should be able to
Okay.
unmute.
Anthony?
All right, wave your hand if you could hear me. Awesome.
Great.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for having me even virtually. And Shelby is definitely a hard act to follow, but also I wanted to thank the board and Superintendent Robbins because we really try to work with all of our partners the same way we would work with each other at Education Elements. It's a way of sharing and learning together, collaborating, and transferring knowledge to each other, the context that you have, the work that you guys do every single day, while we're able to provide some synthesis of what's going on in the country and some practices that allow you to implement your work every day in the district that you serve. But ultimately, that collaboration has to happen together. And so what I've learned through kind of the few books that I've written is that how we work matters a lot. And it's not just what we work on, but how we work and collaborate, share, listen to each other, make sure that people feel included, and also providing the psychological safety that's necessary so that all of the diverse ideas are presented and then we can make the best decision possible. So that's kind of the ethos of how we think about our work, and we're eager to start work with you guys on this project.
Thank you, Anthony. I'm going to see if I can. All right, here we go. So here's what we've prepared to talk to you about this evening. Certainly want to give you an overview of the process and a rough timeline, really, that at this point we're proposing, but we won't finalize until we officially kick off the work and get the input from our project team. Would also love to talk about the role and responsibilities that you all can take on as a Board of Education, get your input on that, answer any questions for sure. And then finally, we'll spend some time talking about our plans to engage the community, what that looks like in the process. Certainly welcome to have a conversation about that as well. I thought we could go section at a time. I'll kind of start with the first part and stop and see what you'd like to discuss or what questions you have, and then we can move on to the second part if that works for you all, but feel free to stop me at any time. I think it's something to know that's, I think, important about our organization that will inform the process is, as we've talked about before, strategic planning is not the only work that we do. So we're constantly bringing in our work in things like leadership development and equity and instructional design, team development. All of that informs how we think about strategic planning. And we're always looking for, as Superintendent Robbins said, opportunity to bring in those resources that we have that can help inform the team and their work going forward. So you'll certainly have the benefit of everything that we have to offer, and we'll continue to bring that in addition to, as Anthony said, sharing out what we've learned in working with districts all over the country and trying to be a good resource of those practices that you may not otherwise be exposed to. So we really take that on as our role here. And another thing that is unique to us and how we think about planning is we're constantly pushing organizations to be more responsive just in how they work, how they're structured, and that really shows up in our strategic planning work. And what that means is, as you see here, is that in the process of developing a plan, we are absolutely prioritizing process over product. We think our work here is to create a strategic planning process that replicates itself on an ongoing way. And the people who participate in this project, which we hope will be a lot, will build these muscles and this expertise around how to sustain a plan and adapt a plan and knowing when to pivot when it calls for that. So just a few things about kind of our beliefs when it comes to that sort of planning is that we 100% believe that when we bring in a lot of perspectives and we consult with lots of people in your district and they feel included, then the plan is developed with people and not for your community. We'll talk about that a little bit more here, but we don't want this to be something we develop in a room like this and then share out and say, look at this wonderful thing we did. We want everyone to feel like they had a part in it, and it's something that we've developed with them. We also think that really creates, it helps create buy-in for the process, for the plan that results out of it. It's such an opportunity to build relationships with the community when you ask them, you guys know this, but when you ask them for their input and you use that input for something big like planning, there's relationship building there, there's trust that's built there, and we really believe in that opportunity here. We will prioritize things like design sprints for this process. We are going to plan for pivot points, again, leaning into that idea of being really responsive. We're going to make sure that we prioritize communication through this, that it's clear, it's constant. Everyone feels like they know what's going on at any point throughout this process. So there's no surprises at the end, and everyone, again, feels like they've been really read into and included as part of this process. So we love this Eisenhower quote about, plans are useless, but planning is indispensable. That's kind of our mantra as we go through this. And when I'll give you kind of the specifics of our process here in a second. But before I do, I'm going to give Anthony a chance to talk a little bit more. We've been talking about these these through lines of learning, a little more thinking about organizational change. Anthony, I'll let you talk to these next couple of slides.
Thanks, Shelby. I think one of the things that you'll notice that's a bit different with us is that we really try to adapt what we're thinking about and what we're developing for the districts that we work with to be appropriate for the current conditions and the context that's going on today. And so, 10 years ago, we started with blended learning, and then we morphed into doing personalized learning, and then we've added other services along the way. And really now we think that there's all sorts of different opportunities that exist for all districts across the country, and making critical and precise moves that allow you to move the organization forward is absolutely critical right now. And that's why we're so excited about this project. And this idea around a through line is something that I've been developing this year with our partner ISD. And so this concept is really this idea that oftentimes what's happened in the past is strategies don't really align to what happens in the classroom. And so what we're really trying to understand in our work today is how do we make sure that the strategies, the leadership, and the activities and the knowledge that teachers have in the classroom are well aligned, and those goals and the way you see those objectives show up is pretty visible in the way things are done in the schools. And so that through line approach is really essential. And what we saw during the pandemic last year is districts that struggled with that really struggled as an organization. They were in chaos. They couldn't actually activate the rest of the organization well. And districts that, like Canyons, that were pretty well aligned, were able to navigate the changing conditions in our states much better than districts that weren't. And so that's why this concept of through lines through the strategic plan is really clear, and how it gets implemented across an organization can be very different. And if you go to the next slide, what we often reference is this notion of a learning organization. And Peter Senge talks about this out of MIT, about what I don't think anyone can deny that schools should be a learning organization. And so then the question is, like, how do you create a learning organization? And often learning organizations are really about like making change happen, right? Improvements, learning how to do something better. And so these systems of change are often the things that we need to think about and consider when we're trying to learn as an organization. And some of it has to do with leadership, which is, the way in which systems of leadership get implemented in order to design a future state, which is what the strategic plan is going to help us do. But also there are these typical things that we think about, often the policies, practices, and resources. There's another layer that we often touch upon, which is the relationships and the power dynamics, right? Because that's how some of the work gets done. And then the hardest part in getting this work done, especially around a strategic plan, are the mental models. You really have to believe that you can do these things, and it has to permeate through an organization. If you say that you got to have high expectations for all children, that has to permeate through the organization. And that's how we think about the work, as to how the strategic plan will flow into the rest of the organization and how they work through the action steps that they need to take in order to live out the strategic plan.
Thanks, Anthony. Let me just, one more thing here on the process. I want to give you kind of the nuts and bolts of what will happen through this process. And this is, pretty high level milestone overview. And then I'll stop and see what questions you guys have, what feedback you want me to take from this conversation just about our approach. So we are very soon going to be in May, which is kind of unbelievable at this point, but we're going to officially kick off the project in May with a project team. I'll talk about the governance a little bit later in this presentation, but with a small project team in the district, we will kick things off. That conversation will include setting project goals, I'm already collecting a lot of district data thanks to my time here today, but we will continue to do that through the kickoff. We'll introduce this governance structure and start identifying individuals to sit on different teams. We're going to spend some time analyzing a lot of that information, and then we're going to hold what we call a current state workshop, which is where we just align on what is currently true about the district, some of the messaging that we want to include about that current state when we get into community engagement, how we want that current state to inform what we do going forward. So it's a good kind of just foundational grounding step there. When we get into the foundation stage, so we'll meet with our steering team for the first time. We will really what we do in that first meeting is they help us decide the community engagement strategy. We'll spend a lot of time building that with them, talking about the different ways to engage the community, how and when. Then we're going to hit that community engagement pretty hard around back to school time. We talk about how that's when stakeholders are the most engaged and paying attention to the district. It's a great opportunity to get some feedback from them and involve them in this process. We go back to the steering the steering team, then again and talk about, present what we found through that community engagement and propose some focus areas, which really end up being the pillars of the plan. People sometimes call them priorities. There's usually anywhere from 3 to 6. That becomes the bones of the plan. And then we are certainly going to be doing some board updates throughout this entire process, but we do a pretty big one after that point to kind of officially share with you where we are at that point, get your input on what we have proposed to the steering committee, what they decided on, get some input there, because that is such a critical kind of point. Everything else builds off of that. We want certainly your involvement at that point. And then we are going to hit the design phase in the fall. October, November, December is really where we have that plan. Might actually be able to start as soon as September. This is the part you usually think of when you think of strategic planning. We're going to put working groups around each of those priority areas, take them through those design sprints where they get very immersed in lots of information. They look at models and exemplars from other organizations or other education organizations, non-education organizations, really get inspired around new ideas. We use a lot of our facilitation skills to get them thinking big. And then we take those big ideas and start whittling them down into a plan so that there are things like strategies identified, action plans. We develop a theory of action so they know how they're going to measure what they intend the impact to be out of each of those strategies and action plans. All of that culminates with some more conversations with the steering team where they provide feedback on that. It's not explicitly called out here, but we actually challenge those planning teams to also go back to the community and test out some of their ideas when they get really specific. We give them a process for talking to more people, testing it out before they finalize the contents that they're going to propose to the steering committee and then ultimately to you all. Once that is done, we've got a final one there where we package everything together with the steering team, tie up all of our loose ends and get it ready to present to you guys. One other thing I will note there is we had ongoing through this whole process, we're checking in biweekly with our project team. We also will have a process in place for ongoing updates for the board. In our plan and align phase, we will work with the project team to figure out what the right format for that is, the kind of information and how frequently you should get it. It would be something that you get throughout this entire process, both formally and informally. A lot of information. I'll stop, see what questions you have. I also have my notebook so I can take notes on your feedback, but I'm open to any discussion at this point.
Okay, board, some questions, comments of this section? I mean, we'll have opportunity to come back to it if we
absolutely
you want. Mr. Wrigley, and then Mrs.
A couple
Nygaard.
questions. Some of this, we may not all be familiar with all this. Is there certain books you would recommend that we read during this next year that would give us some foundational insight into this?
That is a really good question. I'm actually going to take that away as some homework for me. If you all are interested in some reading around this, I know for sure that one of Anthony's books is what I'm going to recommend to you, The New School Rules, because it talks a lot about responsive planning. A lot of the practices that we will use through this process are named and described in that book. So that's one, but I'm sure we can recommend others. Anthony, I don't know if you have any off the top of your head that you want to recommend in terms of reading.
Well, I guess just to clarify, is there a particular aspect of strategic planning or the work that you wanted to dig in a little bit deeper around?
Yeah, it'd just be helpful if we had some basic foundation.
Yeah, I would
Couple good
say,
books on this, so we know sort of the philosophies and that we speak the same language, I guess.
okay, got it. So, yeah, I mean, Shelby mentioned like my book, The New School Rules, which we talk about like the 6 practices for thriving schools, but also there's some good books. One is called Immunity to Change, which really talks about how organizations adopt the change. And another book is The Fifth Discipline, which talks about learning organizations. And then there's another book called Team of Teams by General McChrystal, which talks about how teams function and how to make more effective decisions in a constantly changing world. But we could definitely give you a more comprehensive list.
Great, thank you.
Mrs. Nybar, did you have a question?
Yeah, I just have a question with your slide, necessity of through lines for learning successfully. When I was reviewing this before the meeting, I'm not sure how this integrates with the rest of the presentation. So maybe you can explain that a little more. Explain to me where is that, how is that integrated? I understand the pyramid. I think the through lines, the things the pandemic taught us. Is that something we're keeping in mind as we're doing this? I'm not sure. I don't see how that integrates with the rest of what we're talking about. And I just think there's maybe some things. So explain that to me.
Sure.
Because I don't think we're just guiding this off of things the pandemic taught us. So
Yeah,
to me.
Absolutely. So, and thanks for asking. I think that we wanted to present this slide because we wanted to, one, just kind of focus on the pyramid and talk about how strategies, leadership, and what happens in the classroom like really has to work together, right? And that alignment is really essential for you to achieve the outputs that you want to set or the goals that you want to set. We also, I think with the through line concept, and I didn't want to detract from that, but what I wanted to make sure is that, so many districts that we work with actually say, well, we want to make sure we take the lessons we've learned through this whole experience. And these were just sample lessons, other ideas that the districts we've talked to brought up as things that they learned through the experiences that we had. I'm not saying that these are the same experiences that you had, but what we want to understand through this process are what are the lessons learned and which ones do we want to, evolve and bring forward, and which ones do we say it's a one-time occurrence, right? And so just understanding all of those things so that we can evolve as an organization was my intent with this slide.
So it's more like the pandemic taught us through lines. That's an example of how all of these 3 levels of the pyramid, that's kind of illustrating, right? The importance that they're all working together rather than we are limited to this, or this is, okay,
right.
Makes sense. Thank you.
Other comments on this section, or should we move on? We'll move on.
All right. Okay, so next I'd love to, and this is certainly, I would love your input and feedback on some ideas here, but breaking down the governance structure a little bit more, I think will help identify some opportunities for the Board of Education to be involved in this process. And one of the questions we got when we were interviewed through the RFP process, and we get this a lot, is what is the role of the Board of Education? And honestly, that looks different everywhere we work. It very much depends on your collective desires as a board and your individual interests and where you feel like you add the most value to this process. So that's one of the ways that we customize it. But we certainly have some ideas to run by you for your feedback here. So I mentioned that we have a governance structure. The idea or the theory behind the structure is we're creating feedback loops, right? There's not just one team that is doing all of the work. There are these, I don't know if checks and balances is the right phrase here, but there's this constant stream of feedback to make sure that we're not limited in our perspectives and we are getting a lot of input as we go. The project team is very much more of a logistics team. They really help us get the meetings on the books and help us identify the right people. They keep the wheels turning. The steering team is in a lot of ways a decision-making body, as it says here. They steer the course. You know, we meet with them 4 times. I'll tell you a little bit more about them in a second. We meet with them 4 times, and often the content of those conversations are we on the right track here? What feedback do you have? What would you recommend that we do differently here? The planning teams are the ones that really get into the nuts and bolts of the planning. They really get into the details of the work. We will have several planning teams, and these are the ones that are grouped based on those specific focus areas. And then oftentimes we have advisors, not always, but these are people that kind of come in and out of the process based on what we're working on. I feel like a lot of the people that I met today will serve as advisors in some way because they have such unique content matter expertise. So one of the ideas that we've thought about in terms of board involvement is in the steering committee. It's not a huge group. Usually it's around 15, 20 people, depending on the size of the district and what makes sense. But I do like the ideas of reserving, 2 to 3 seats on this team, and members of the board kind of rotate in and out of those seats. So you get to participate in 1 or more of the steering team meetings without over-representing the board in terms of the makeup of that team. So I've given you more description here on specifically who that is and then what those meetings with that team are like. I mentioned again, there's usually some visioning exercise. There's the advising on the community engagement in the beginning, reviewing that community feedback, helping us prioritize focus areas. And then in the second half, it's really giving feedback to those planning teams that are doing a lot of the design work and reviewing kind of the final update towards the end. The other idea is certainly in these planning teams. Each of you represent your own perspectives. You represent specific perspectives across the district. It might make sense depending on what these planning teams end up looking like and what their focus areas are. For 1 or more of you to serve on one of those teams. And it's certainly something that we are open to. They are, what we have currently in the plan is 3 half-day design workshops. The difference between this team and the steering team is it'd be easier to flow in and out of the steering team. If you're on a planning team, you pretty much have to be there through the whole thing, or it's hard. It kind of, each one builds on itself. I want to stop there. Those were kind of the very specific ideas, again, around like different parts of the governance structure where you could plug in. But I also want to remind you, we definitely have intentional plans, as I laid out in the kind of overview of the project, to continue to be really open with updates as we go through the process, building in some more formal conversations with you all throughout the process. So I'd love to pause there, answer questions, get feedback or ideas from you guys.
Okay, board comments, questions? Mrs. Oaks and then Mrs. Nybar.
I just want to say I'm really excited. I'm really looking forward to working with both you and with Anthony and getting a better sense of what it is our community wants, what our students want. I mean, I thought about that tonight when we had our student advisory council here. If there's anything that process with them has taught me is that their voice and their perspective is so valuable. And so I'm excited to be able to capture that and effectively gain a vision as a district. And I love what you had to say about the fact that this isn't something that should come from us to the public. It's something that we need to develop with them. And I am so excited that you can help us along in that process. Thank you.
Thank you. Mrs. Nybar?
I love getting to share the stakeholders and the sharing perspective from the community as well, and that's really exciting. When you describe the steering committee as the decision-making body made up of representatives of your district, to me, it feels like that's the more natural place for school board members to be. also wanting community members from diverse backgrounds, but we are the elected representatives, literally, of districts. And so because we have been elected to represent them, to me makes the most sense for us to be able to be part of that committee and less of a floating, because we just hear from so many families and stakeholders all the time. And I think that we can help make sure in that role that those things are being considered, as well as, the experience. Several members of the board have been, school board members for a long time and duration. So just my initial thoughts are, it seems like that's more of a natural place than the planning teams, but maybe others have other ideas. But I feel better about not doing a floating, but more that it wouldn't be floating, that we'd be there. I don't know how many times it looks like, a few meetings, but that makes the most sense to me, so that all districts are represented when we're talking about having stakeholders represented and needs. And we recognize there's different needs in our districts, and they're not necessarily aligned to the others. It makes a lot of sense to me to feel like there's that.
So other thoughts, Mrs. Schill?
Oh, so Holly, I just want to make sure I understand you. So are you saying the whole board should be on that committee? I mean, I don't know. I'm just trying to understand what you mean by that.
I think if it's these 4 meetings, yes, I do. I think that we can represent our districts, and there will be other people on this steering committee too, not just us. But I think it's better. I think floating in and out is difficult. I don't know that you can help steer a committee very well if you're only there one time and it rotates the person. So I think being there, for the duration of those 4 meetings is very much more helpful and consistent.
Yeah, to that point, I think maybe you could clarify when you say decision-making body, that's really not deciding what goes in the plan. It's more deciding of scheduling and reviewing. And then I picture that with the idea of the floating or the rotating seats, similar to our student advisory council, how we did that this year, where we signed up and those that were able or wanted to got an opportunity. But I see that everything comes straight to the board in a board meeting for updates, and that the steering committee would be similar to our other committees, like we heard earlier tonight, where, we've talked about this and this is what we're thinking, and bring it to the board. And now let's hear what the board's thinking on this before moving forward anymore.
Right. No,
So that's kind of how I picture it a little bit more, rather than the steering committee and meeting one, making a decision that's firm and solid, and then the board doesn't have any way to provide any input until, at the very end. I see us being almost like parallel tracks of meeting and discussion. And like you said earlier, with these kind of the overlap of conversation to create these continuous loops.
Yeah.
So that's how I was picturing it when you were describing it.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. When it says decision-making body, that's certainly not final decision-making. That's your role. You're an approving board. This is more a deciding what goes to you. There are going to be a lot of decision points throughout this process in terms of, do we go A or do we go B? What feels safe enough to try at this point? What do we need feedback on? What kind of engagement strategy are we going to use in the beginning? Those are really the decision points that we rely on this committee for. But I totally agree that you all being the kind of ultimate approving body here, there has to be a whole feedback loop with you additionally, or at the within this context, if this is how you decide to do it, where by the time things are submitted to you for final approval, you already know what's in it. Nothing is a surprise there. You've been along for the ride the whole way.
Okay, thank you, Mrs. Oaks, and then Mrs. Nybar and Mr. Wrigley.
So just a clarifying part of an answer to Holly's question. So part of the thought was when we had that conversation last time about the idea of having a rotating system is partially because every time we have 4 or more members of the board, it becomes a public meeting. So we would literally be pretty much doubling our public meetings for those months, and everything has to be submitted into public record. And while I don't mind necessarily doing that, it does make things more complicated. And I think in many ways it makes the process of creativity and open discussion, it hampers it because everything's going on recorded record at every moment. So part of what we discussed was making sure that there is a return to report mechanism